Have any of you got dreams that you hope to achieve? Have you ever doubted yourself, feared that you might not be successful? Or have you ever thought there might be something more inside of you, something unique, a natural talent to share with the world? And we can't ever admit that, can we? It's a little bit egotistical, and we're told not to. But if you felt any of those things, I felt them too. When I was 43, I was blessed to become mum to Scarlett. Scarlett's my North Star. She guides me daily to be the very best version of myself. When she was 9 months old, I found the lump. And my mind immediately leapt to fear. Fear that I wouldn't be around to see her grow into whomever she's destined to be. Fear that I wouldn't be able to share with her all the love, the guidance, the advice, the support, the care that I'd hoped to be with her on her journey. And so I went to write a letter to cram all of that into something that could survive me and support her on her journey. I remember looking down at that blank sheet of paper, taunting me with my inability to get started. Because where do you start that letter? I didn't know. And so I remember going upstairs for inspiration. I crept into a room and watched her, fast asleep, Lenny the lion tucked safely under her arm, breathing heavily as she dreamt about her day and made sense of her adventures. And it struck me in that moment that I wanted to tell her that there was nothing she couldn't do, that she needed to just believe in herself, to take action, to be unstoppable, and to believe in all that she could achieve. And whilst I wanted to say all of those things to her, while I believed them to be true, I realised I didn't believe them to be true of me all of the time. And it struck me in that minute that our children don't learn just by what we say. They learn by what we do and how we are. And that the voice that we talk to ourselves becomes the voice we teach our children to talk to themselves. It was like the world stopped. Or maybe it was just my heart. Because I haven't always been very kind to myself. I haven't always demonstrated the belief that I'd like to see in my child. And so I vowed that if I were granted the gift of more life with Scarlett, I would go and do the work to understand how to change the voice in my head, to leave the legacy for Scarlett. What followed was months of doctors, tests, treatments, and I was lucky. I was granted the gift of more life with Scarlett. And I remembered my vow to go and change the voice in my head to make sure it wasn't the voice I left in hers. And that brings me to the idea I want to share with you guys today. An idea designed to help you to build brave belief, to be unstoppable, and to achieve whatever it is you desire for you and for your teams. So what did I learn? Well, I went on quite a journey, listening to inspirational speakers, going to counsellors, coaches, taking training, and I identified that it comes down to one simple thing: belief. If we think for a moment about hope and fear, both of them are imagined. Whatever we're fearful of hasn't happened yet. We have to imagine it. We have to think about what that's going to feel like. The same's true for whatever we hope for. Also hasn't happened. Also has to be imagined. In exactly the same brain. The same brain imagines both. So why is it that we believe that what we're fearful of is more credible and more likely than what we're hopeful for? Because both were created by us. And it brings me to Einstein's theory of relativity. So he shares with us that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The same is true not just of what we do, but what we say and what we think. Our subconscious brain is the happiest helper we will ever have in our life. But it comes with one really significant flaw. It doesn't understand the difference between help and harm. Whatever we tell it, it goes and finds evidence to prove us right. So when I tell it I'm going to stand up and do public speaking, it reminds me that 23 years ago, I stood up in a room significantly bigger than this one and told about 600 people that the charity we were about to support was Imperial Leather, which clearly is a soap. And the charity I was desperately searching for was Imperial Cancer. And despite the fact that 23 years later, I've not said anything that stupid again, it still brings it back to mind. And so I have to ask myself, are there any times when I've been good, or at least okay, at public speaking? And it will then run back into the library of my brain and bring back all of the times where people stopped to tell me their story after hearing me speak, or write to me months later to share with me something they'd achieved as a result of having taken some action following a conversation that we'd had. And so I can look at it now and go, okay, I can get it wrong. I can say something really daft. Or I could get it right. Which one am I going to choose to believe? And then I focus where I want to go. Because our subconscious brain will try and find ways to make it happen. If you think about a time you were going to buy a car, and you know the make, the model, the colour, and all of a sudden, all you see is that car. And it's not because all of a sudden there's more of those cars around. It's because your subconscious brain is filtering it into view. It's trying to make it happen. So if we can learn to be focused on where we want to go instead of where we don't want to go, it makes a big difference. As human beings, we believe that we tell the truth. But what if I were to tell you it's just our truth? And that the opposite could also be true. And it comes down to that word, belief. Imagine, if you will, that in the morning you wake up, you're going to have to learn how to walk, or talk, or run, or skip. You'd be overwhelmed. We'd all be overwhelmed. And yet the reality is, at our most vulnerable, we learnt it. So why is that? And again, I believe it comes down to one thing in two parts, belief. The first is we believe that we can, because we believe we're like you. We think we're like our parents, so you can do it, so I can do it. So there is that belief that if I keep trying, I'm going to get there. And the second, and perhaps for me the most important lesson I learnt in leadership, was I've yet to see a child learning to walk that doesn't have at least one adult nearby going, come on, you've got this, you can do it. We quite literally give them our belief so they can add it to their own. And we do this as adults every day, but we just don't do it overtly. As human beings, we don't want to look stupid. We don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to be silly. And so when we ask somebody, when we ask a member of our team to do something, or when somebody asks us to do something, it's because they believe we're going to be successful. If not, they look silly just as much as we look silly. But what if they shared with us exactly why it was they believed we were going to be successful? We know from the statistics that 70% of the world globally at some point doubts their ability, doesn't believe in themselves. Imagine the impact we could have if when we asked them to do something, we shared exactly why we think they're going to be successful. And I've seen the power of this. I've spent the last 20 years running multi-million-pound organisations, and belief is the greatest gift that we can share. I was working with a client recently, and they'd got a massive target. They headed into the last day of their financial year, and they needed to make £500,000, something that they'd got nowhere close to. The ask was tremendous. And I stood with the leadership team, and we shared with that team exactly why we believed they were going to be successful, specifically what it was about them that we needed them to continue to do today to enable them to be successful. I can't begin to describe the moment when their belief matched ours, when you realised that they no longer needed to borrow ours because they believed it of themselves. They didn't just hit that target, they annihilated it. And they've gone on to regularly have £1 million days. And it was because they now had the right belief. So what would I like you to take away from giving me the gift of listening to me? I'd like you to take away 2 things. The first is the next time you find yourself focused on something you don't want, ask yourself, what do I want? And choose to believe that it will happen. And the second is the next time you're given an opportunity to share your belief in somebody else, take it. You never know the impact that's going to have. And I'd like to end by sharing with you a quote that I wrote for Scarlett, and I believe it to be true of everybody. Be kind. Be curious. Take action. Dream big. And believe, because you are proof that miracles happen. Thank you for listening.